Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible stories ever told. A story of faith, of patience, and of a mission that lasted an unbelievable 950 years. This is the story of the Prophet Nuh.
But before we get into it, I want to ask you something. How long do you think you could keep sharing a message that, well, almost nobody wants to hear? A year? Maybe 10 years? The story we're about to explore takes this question to a whole other level. All right, so let's set the scene. We're about 1,000 years after Adam. Humanity has spread across the earth, but something's been lost. That direct connection to God, it's gone. People have turned away from worshiping the one true God and started bowing down to idols they made themselves. And it's into this world that the prophet Nuh receives his divine calling.
So, what was the main problem Noah was sent to fix? It was idol worship. And this wasn't just some small disagreement, it was a total departure from the original path. People were literally worshiping statues, physical objects they'd carved with their own hands, and in the process, they'd forgotten the one who actually created them. Nuh's message was actually incredibly simple. Fear Allah and do what Allah says. That's it. He begged his people to come back to the one true God. But they just wouldn't listen. They refused to give up their idols. And that rejection, that was just the very beginning of what would become an almost unimaginable test of faith. We're not talking about a mission that lasted a few years or even a few decades. We're talking about a mission that went on for nearly 1,000 years. For 950 years. Just let that sink in. Nuh preached his message. Day in and day out, in public, in private, he called out to his people. It's a length of time that's honestly hard for us to even wrap our minds around. You know, his society was completely split. The few people who actually believed him, they were the poor, the weak, the people without any social standing. The vast majority, the powerful, the wealthy, the influential, they were the ones who clung to their idols and fought against his message.
And the rejection got personal. It was insulting. They'd say things like, "You are just another man, and we think that you are lying." And their final demand was always the same: go away and leave us alone.
But this was way more than just verbal abuse. Noah was constantly under threat. He was stoned by angry crowds. He was beaten with sticks. He was ridiculed every single day. And yet, through all of that, for 950 years, he never, ever stopped calling to them. I mean, talk about the ultimate test of faith.
So, after centuries of preaching to people who just became more and more stubborn, Nuh's mission takes a very strange turn. God gives him a new command, something that must have sounded like complete madness to everyone else. Build a massive ship on top of a mountain.
And this was no weekend project. The very first step was just to plant trees. And then, for more than 100 years, Nuh and his small group of followers had to wait for those trees to grow big enough. Only then did the real work begin, building this gigantic ark, way up on a mountain, miles and miles from any sea.
As you can imagine, the ridicule just got worse. The disbelievers would watch them working on this giant boat and were totally convinced he'd finally lost his mind. They'd mock him constantly, asking how he planned to get it to the water. But Nuh's reply was always calm and a little ominous. You will come to know very soon. And yeah, that day of reckoning was coming. With the ark finally finished, it was time. Time for God's promise to be fulfilled and for his punishment to be unleashed.
The signal that it was all about to begin wasn't just a dark cloud or a drop of rain. No, the sign God gave Noah was way stranger and way more terrifying. Water started to boil and gush out of the stove in his own house. It was this bizarre, supernatural sign that the time had finally come. So Noah immediately gathers the believers, only about 80 people after all those centuries, and gets them onto the ark. And then this incredible thing starts to happen. The animals begin to arrive. In pairs, a male and a female of every single species on Earth, from the biggest elephant to the smallest bird, all coming to find safety on the ark. But here's where the story gets truly heartbreaking. This is also a story of deep personal tragedy. Nuh pleaded with his own family to come aboard, but one of his wives and one of his sons refused to believe. His son just arrogantly told him not to worry, that he'd climb a mountain to save himself. He had no idea what was coming.
The flood that was unleashed was like nothing the world had ever seen. The ground itself split open, water erupting from below while torrential rain poured from the sky. And then a wave. A colossal wave taller than the highest mountains swept across the entire land, and it consumed everything and everyone in its path, including Noah's own wife and son.
So after that cataclysm, a new chapter begins for the few survivors. They're just adrift on this worldwide ocean, with the Ark carrying the very fragile hope for the future of all life on a journey that would last for months.
For 150 days, that Ark was their entire world. Can you just imagine that? Sailing over a planet completely covered in water, with no land anywhere in sight for 5 straight months?
And even on the Ark, life wasn't perfect. They had practical problems. One story tells of how the ship became totally infested with rats. So Noah prayed for a solution, and in response, God created cats. They took care of the rat problem pretty quickly. A little miracle that restored some balance to their floating home. Finally, after so many days of waiting, Noah started sending out birds to search for land. The first bird didn't come back, but then he sent a dove, and it returned, holding a fresh olive branch in its beak. It was the sign they had been praying for, a symbol of new life, a promise that the waters were going down and a new world was out there waiting for them. And at long last, the journey was over. The massive Ark finally came to rest on the peak of Mount Judy. Noah, his family, the other believers, and all of the animals stepped out onto a clean, fresh earth, ready to start the next chapter of humanity. And the legacy of that tiny olive branch lives on. Because of this story, it's become this universal symbol of peace and new beginnings. It's a powerful reminder that even after the absolute worst storm, there's always, always the promise of a fresh start. So let me ask you, what does that symbol of hope mean to you today?